This is Inside the Wolf's Den, an entrepreneurial journey with Shawn and Joni Wolfswinkel.
Welcome back to Inside the Wolf's Den with your hosts, Shawn and Joni Wolfswinkel. We have another episode for you, and we're going to be talking about sales.
Not my expertise, but so I'm going to lean on you on this little bit one.
What I like to say is everything is sales, right? I mean, you work with your customer service team, like you have to learn the art of persuasion, right?
I mean, I got you, so I must be
exactly. If you can be a good persuader, then you can be good at sales, and I think you have it in you as well. So more than you think, Shawn. But how can you really take your sales, to the next level, and just maybe a few tactics that you can use in your business that can really set you apart from the rest of your competition and elevate your sales skills, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think we're going to talk a lot about that. And, we can start with, preparation, right? Mm-hmm. I think, in sales, you have to really be prepared. And whether it's property management, knowing what that property's like before you go into that call, like the comparables, everything, as much as you can know about that sale, that client before you get onto the call is just going to make the difference, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, we recently, and I think we talked about this on the podcast prior, but so forgive me if we've already talked about this, but in Rooter, we revamped our whole sales approach, mm-hmm. and we went through a new sales training, service MVP. And so it's been really good. And we're still on the adoption phase of it, but something I love about it and something that we had to do is the guys have to go through an extensive hour and a half or 2 hour meeting every day for 4 weeks. And we really went in deep about it. And it's more handling objections, handling like how to approach the client, what to say, how to get 2 commitments from the client, just small little sales details that, mm-hmm. that are key to any, eliminating the competition or needing for additional quotes. And there's certain things you can do in a sales pitch or a sales funnel that you can eliminate some of those issues. And so, but what it really came down to with the technicians, like you said, was preparation. And so they have to graduate from this class. And so a lot of them were really nervous. Joni and I graduated ourselves and went through the whole thing.
Again, as a business owner, you have to practice what you preach, right? If you want your salespeople to follow your lead, you have to be a good leader. And we got in there and did the whole sales presentation and prep for it ahead of time. Yeah,
but so what the cool thing about this class is that you spend about an hour learning every day, and then you spend an hour, like a half an hour to an hour role playing every day. Mm-hmm. And so, and I think a lot of people take that as like foolish, like, oh, role playing, when did they laugh at it, but like the people that take it serious and the people that really are practice, and you and I did it. We did it with our kids, we did it with each other, we did it with other people in the office, and you would just role play and go through because all it and that what I was trying to meet when I met with the guys, I was really like, hey guys, like this isn't like there's no rocket scientist to there's nothing mm-hmm. fancy. There's nothing, you don't have to be the best communicator. You don't have to be, and they have recordings that we can watch. And if you look at those guys, like there's nothing fancy about them. And they're just ordinary people, just like we are. But they prepared themselves and they practiced to where the language started to become comfortable. And when they get an objection, it just like, oh, I've seen this objection before. Here's how I handle this objection, and here's what I say to go this direction with it, right? And but it's being prepared and practicing so that every time you hit those objections, it's not new to you. You've seen that.
100%.
You've seen that before. I know what to do. I know how to handle this. I know the outcome I can get if I take it this way. And so you just go through it. And there's times you get a curveball, but then you learn from that curveball, right? And you learn like, okay, here's what I should have done. Here's here's not the outcome I got. So
100%.
Yeah, right.
Repetition and role play. And you nailed it. Cause I think a lot of times salespeople are like, oh, this is a joke. Like, why am I doing this? Right. But again, it's the more you do it, the more as you get an objection, it just rolls off your tongue easy because you already know, what is coming next. Right.
So, I think again, one of the most crucial things you can do is prepare. And so like whether it's you're giving a sales pitch in front of, a large audience, or you're doing a presentation, or you're meeting one-on-one with a client, or you're meeting with your boss to try to sell them on a raise, you should come in prepared, right? You should, I think we stole this from Alex or Mosey. He said one time, like, I forgot the ratio. I think it was like 4-1 or something like that, or 1-4, however you look at it. But like, so if you have an hour call or an hour, your meeting's an hour, you should prepare like 25 minutes in advance. So, or if you have a 30-minute call, you prepare 5 minutes, 10 minutes in advance. And so for every call you have, every sales pitch, everything, you should prepare that 1-4 ratio in a and this is something he was talking about on his podcast, and it didn't even cross my mind. Like, so if he has a 1-day class or 1-day, presentation or mastermind or something like that, he's preparing like 2 hours for that.
Especially if it's something that is new to you and that you've never done before, right? You have to, the best entrepreneur, the best people out there are going to prepare more for that particular presentation because they don't know it well enough, right?
Yeah. And most people think like when they see a great sales presentation or they see somebody that's great on stage, they don't realize that those people just prepared and went through it, or they practiced a lot, they went through it, and then they've been doing the same speech over and over again. So it's like second nature to them.
Which, so now you brought up, because I think that scripts are crucial as well, which I get a lot of times from people like, oh, I don't like scripts. Scripts are, repetitive and, I want to be more natural. But you have to have scripts available, because again, it's all about when you role play, that's just going to come off the tip of your tongue if the more you say it, right? So have a script. Yeah, you don't have to say it verbatim, but you should have a script. Yeah. Right.
And it's going to feel uncomfortable, right, at first, no matter what.
100%.
Yeah. And how have you learned to master certain things that you're uncomfortable at first? Does it get easier? Does it get better the more you do it?
The more you do it, the easier it gets. And at the very beginning, I used to, because I can record my calls. And so I would go back and listen to myself. And I hated listening to myself, but I would, look at things and tweak them, listen to them and I'll tweak them, or I could have said that better, or I could have handled this objection better. Right. And so again, it's all about practicing. Like even to our level now, you have to continue to practice. Right.
Yeah. And something that this happens a lot with our salespeople and our BDMs and even technicians. So there's 2 points I have to make. One is that, they should deliver the same. So if you are taught a strategy or a framework, that's the word I was looking for. So really what we're teaching is framework, right? Or even it could be a script, however you want to call it, but a framework of how you're delivering that sales approach. If it works and it's worked for somebody else really well, or multiple people, especially if it's been like, so if you go through a big sales organization like Service MVP for service industry, and it works, then
why wouldn't you reinvent the wheel?
Correct. But a lot of people do, right? They're like, oh, I don't like that part of it. It makes me, it sounds cheesy or feels uncomfortable. But what do you say to that when you hear that? Because there was a lot of times in that presentation, and you and I went through it. So it's maybe not something we would have invented, but it's worked, right, for 30 years. So I'm
a firm believer that if it works, like why try to create something that you're not sure if it's going to work or not? If it's worked, hey, that's going to get you to the next level, right? Like, a lot quicker than if you were to create it yourself, right?
And it was, and it's a lot of the things in it are like to get 2 confirmations from the person, or which I mentioned before, or to eliminate them saying, well, I need to talk to somebody else, right? Or if it's like it's a price objection, well, the way we structured it and went through it, it's like, well, let's take off the top. Not we're going to give a discount. Let's just remove the top option so that then we'll go more into your budget and talk more about that. But we're not giving price tags. We're just different options for them. So like stuff like that. So you learn that it's not necessarily, you don't have to deviate. There's different scenarios to get to where you want.
Right. And I think a lot of times, like salespeople, a lot of times they just want to, talk about their company and how great my company is, and how, instead of really listening to what are the pain points that this client is facing, whether it's, in property management, like, they want to avoid evictions, or in plumbing, right? Like, solving the pain point of having, hot water, whatever it is, like active listening to the customer to see what their needs really are. And then from there, that's how you direct the call, right? Where a lot of times I think salespeople, they just want to talk, and have you ever been to like a car dealership and you're like, man, I just want to get out of here because this salesperson, all he does is talk. I don't like, nothing that he's saying is hitting my button. Yeah. Right.
Resonate. And you gotta be aware, and yes, absolutely. And tentatively listening to the client, listening to their pain point, listen and finding it out, and then
how can you provide value to them?
Correct.
Right. That's going to solve,
meeting them where they're at.
Right.
Not a lot of times you go in meeting them at where you think they need, or you think what you're trying to sell them, right? Because maybe you get a better commission, or you're not hearing what the client actually wants. Correct. Yeah. Something I was going to mention I never finished the second thing that I wanted to really emphasize with the approach or the framework, and you can speak to this or answer this question for me. I think a lot of times salespeople get an objection that they've never heard before, and they fumble through it. They probably make a mistake. The client gets upset, or the client, they lose trust or something. And so they're like, man, I blew it right there. And so they start second guessing themselves, and then they start changing. They maybe sold five contracts before that, but then all of a sudden they get this one objection, and it like derails them, and then they totally go back to bad habits.
It happens all the time with salespeople, and that's one of the reasons why in our sales meetings we listen to those calls, because we can pinpoint quickly like why that salesperson deviated from the process, right? And it's typically because they've had an objection that they weren't sure about. And so then they're like, oh, I'm just going to handle it this way. Right. And they go back to their old habits. Okay.
And so how do you fix that? Or what do you, I guess, listen to the calls and role playing that situation, right? Again, it's all role playing that, because it's not going to be the only time that you get that objection. You're going to get it again. Right. And so it's crucial that your sales managers have those sessions with you to role play. Yeah. And then it's usually going back to the original, right? Going back to the original process and the framework and all that, right? You go back to it and be like, no, you got to go stay on course. If you get this, here's how you bring it back to where it's usually about bringing it back, the conversation back to where you want it, correct?
Correct. Yeah. And you can do that by asking questions. So, if you get an objection, you can quickly ask maybe another question. Well, why is that important to you? Right.
That's a good one. Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of times, something we learned, that we hadn't done. I mean, we always knew to like lay out the sales and then like shut up and just listen, right?
Yeah. And don't close beyond the close, like, right? I think Alex Hormozi might have said that. Like, there's so many times where we just don't want to shut up, and like you keep talking, and you've already sold them, but you keep talking. Now you just like lost the sales because you just keep talking, right?
And it was something that was really good from the sales program we went through, because it was like, you always end everything pretty much with like, so what should we do? What should we do? And so you're putting back on the client, like, so what's the next steps? Well, how are we going to handle this? And where we move forward. You're listening to them, right? You're letting them tell you if you did a good enough presentation, they should be, when you say, what should we do? What should we do? And they should be following right into
your footsteps. And you're looking for, hey, like, I'm ready to get started today. Like, what are my next steps? Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what you're looking for.
Yeah. And it's, and getting that like approval and headed in the right direction, where you were taking the sales call anyway, but it looks like in their eyes that they're still in control and they're leading that sales, right?
Yes.
That's a good salesperson can make the person feel like they made that decision, and they because people, and talk a little bit about emotion in sales and with the client.
Emotion.
So like, because how do people don't necessarily buy a lot of times off logic, right? They buy off emotion. So speak to that, or like when you're dealing with, let's just say like RTM sales, right? So remote team member sales, and you're dealing with a client, and when you're, I know I've heard a lot of your calls because we office next door to each other. You're focused a lot of times on the emotion that client's experiencing in their business, right?
It's typically in anything. I think you have to focus on the pain points, which is the emotional part of it, right? Because obviously they're struggling in some area, and so what you're looking for is how can you relieve that pain. What service can you provide them, or what value can you provide them to relieve that pain that they're receiving, right? And so I always look at that, and I talk through that process with them, like what if I can remove this pain point for you, what would that be like for you, right? How much more can you get done during the day if we can just delegate these tedious tasks to somebody else, right? And then they can see and picture themselves like, like I can see myself doing so much more and working on the business versus in the business, right? Because they can see themselves through that.
Yeah. I mean, because it seems like logical, right? That you can get labor for half the price and without all the risk and everything. That's the logical approach, and that works for some people. Some people are very logical, but most people buy off emotion. So you're speaking because it's logical to buy an RTM, but not everybody goes in contracts to get one, right? So why? And then when you bring with the emotion, like you just talked about, then it's like, okay, now I can feel it, right? I can feel that stress going away. I can feel I can delegate this, right? So you're taking away that emotion. They makes them feel better, so they want to buy it just because like I want that feeling, not the logic of that it's going to cost me half the price of a US based employee.
100%.
But it's and the same thing when we're focused on our rooter sales, it's like we're so focused on, because so a lot of times you go into a house, right? And they'll tell you, well, hey, my sink's my disposal's leaking under the kitchen sink. And you're like, okay. And most plumbers are like, great, like there's a new disposal. It's going to be $325 for a new disposal, and comes with a 1-year warranty. Here's the price. What'd you like me to do? And that sounds great. And some people buy out that and all that. But if you can,
that's transactional,
correct.
Right? I mean,
and if you can build the emotion and be like, hey, like, so what was that experience like when you were washing the dishes and all of a sudden water's just pouring out of your cabinet? What was that like? And what was that like for you? And that's one of the things we teach. And it's like, then the client's like, well, it was stressful. Like I had water running all over my wood floors, and I had the leaks. I had to wipe everything up, and the dog's in my face, and like it was like and we had guests over, and it was embarrassing, and they go into all this detail, and you're like, and so like you're that feeling. So then when you're selling the disposal and maybe a new kitchen faucet and everything, you're like, what would that feel like if I could eliminate that stress for you and take that away from you, and comes with a 5-year warranty, so you don't ever have to. Hey, we're going to come back every year and make sure that the disposal is working just as it's. So I don't ever want you to experience that again. All of a sudden they're like,
man, this
is what I want. I understand you're more expensive than the other guy, but hey, this is what I want. I want that feeling, right?
Yep, so absolutely. Same thing with property management, right? If you can, how would this feel if I can take this burden of you having to, handle all these maintenance requests in the middle of the night, what is that like for you right now, right? And immediately they feel like, oh yeah, like I can do a lot more with my time than focusing on this.
Yeah.
Right?
And don't you think that, do you feel like, because a lot of times I think salespeople get a bad rep because people are trying to like persuade somebody into doing something that they don't, and this is a form of persuasion, but it's I think if you look at it in a different aspect, because there's persuading like trying to convince somebody to buy this now and you've been around those aggressive people, right?
It's almost like you're forcing them, right?
Correct.
Like you're forcing them to buy into something that they don't need or they don't want.
Go into a furniture store or like cars, go to buy a car, and you feel that, and it's not comfortable, right? And they're trying to persuade you in that moment where what we just talked about, we're still persuading that person to buy, but we're we're trying meeting them at what those emotional feelings that they're feeling and speaking to those and eliminating those. And so we're persuading them to use our company so that we can eliminate those pain points or eliminate that, or it could be a positive. It could be because people either buy from they're running away from something, or a lot of times people with emotion are either running away from something or running towards something, right? So it goes both ways. So like with the RTMs, it might be running towards that feeling of like of freedom, right?
Right.
Or like they don't have all that stress.
You just help them in their life of, solving their issue, right? And so, and with that, also build a relationship. You build a long-term relationship where they're like, man, like this plumbing company really like helped me, my situation. Like I'm gonna keep coming back to them,
and
right? Refer other people.
Yeah.
Same thing with property investors, right? Like they help me with my issue. Like I've already built a long-term relationship, and I want to go and refer other people to them as well.
Yeah. And I think this is crucial for listeners is how does that happen overnight?
No, building relationships is, it's constant, right? Yeah. I mean, and as a business owner, it's hard sometimes as you grow and scale because you are the face of the company. And early on, like you and I would, pick up the phone and call our clients just to say, hey, how's it going, right? And I think there's ways that you can still do that as you grow and scale with using video. And, every so often you just pick up the phone and give them a call. But yeah, building relationships over time, I mean, it's crucial and it doesn't happen overnight.
Correct. And because, we have a new salesperson in our organization, and just trying to that was something I was emphasizing with him was that principle, because it was like, I think a lot of times it's like they want it to be transactional and quick, right? And I get it. They're part of their commission, or part of their compensation is a commission based upon their performance. So of course the sooner, the better, the more frequent, the better for them. Right. And we get that. But a lot of times when you're brand new at a job, it might take you double the time, double the effort than maybe the guy that's been there for 5 years already. And he's already cultivated those relationships. He's already understands the scripts and the sales. He's handled all those objections already, so he knows how to steer the conversation because he's already been there. So his sales pitch or his approach might take half of the time of yours because you're still learning. But what I was getting at was, they got to get out there and cultivate those relationships and nurture them. And it's never a transactional sale. A lot of times sometimes you go out, you go to a marketing event or a networking event, and man, you get 2 or 3 leads and they could lead to sales, and that's all great. But a lot of times it's like, hey, I worked this person for 6 months, and all of a sudden, hey, they referred 2 people to me 6 months later. Right?
And I love that you said that, because I think that the best salespeople really cultivate their current customers. Because did you know that each customer is worth about 3 to 5 referrals? And all you need to do is ask them. If you're providing a good service for your customers, all you have to do is ask them, hey, do you know somebody that can benefit from my services? Right?
Yeah. But it takes time, right? And you got to nurture it and be there, and you might have to add a lot of value at first, right? You might have to give to them frequently, and that the more value you give, they're all of a sudden they're like, you've given them so much value, they feel like they're almost obligated to give you something, right? They're looking for people that need plumbing needs because you've added so much value to their life or helped them in certain ways, and you're like, well, I gotta find somebody that can use their service because I feel so obligated to give. So the more you can provide value, right, the better. And you've done that in a lot of relationships, and you've given a lot of value where they've. And
that's where you have to go into it. It's like you said, it's not transaction. You have to go in it providing the value, because it might not happen overnight. You might not get that sale right then and there, but the more you nurture that relationship, then eventually it will pay off for you.
And I think it's just the times we live in, it's just people don't, we want everything now. And so instant. And I think, and it happens, don't get me wrong, there's sales that you can, but I think majority of the time it takes time to build up that volume, right? And if you really want to take it to new heights and you want to be master sales, it's a number one, it takes time for you to prepare and to master your skill and master your framework, and you got to really know what you're doing, and it takes time to get there, and you're going to make it's just more practice and practice and practice.
And you have to get out there and do it, right? Like you know, like, yes, there's one aspect of leads being handed to you, but you got to get out there and work for those leads. Like, honestly, like, salespeople should make a pretty good living, because there's really no ceiling. It's as much as they want to sell, right? And so they can work all day and all night if they wanted to, right? But I think a lot of people, what I see a lot of salespeople, they make money and then they take a 2-week vacation, right? Oh, like, I made a bunch of money, so I'm going to go take a 2-week vacation.
I'm going to show up at noon tomorrow and sleep in, and
like when we were starting out, like, we were knocking on doors at 8 o'clock in the morning to 6:30 at night every single day.
Sometimes 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock. I mean, every single day, day in, day out. There was no breaks, right? And you have to look at it like that. If you're hungry enough and you want to be the top salesperson, that's how hard you have to work.
And it's usually you have to outwork everybody else. And there was a great, it was a lot. Some of this is coming from that podcast with Alex or Mosey about preparation, and that was he really laid it down with. He gave an example. So I'm taking this from him or repeating what he had mentioned, but it was a really good. He was talking about. I this hit home, and I think a lot of people can relate to, especially younger people that are just starting off in sales or newer to an industry. But he was talking about I think it was somebody who was related to him, so like it was like in his organization, right, and kind of got him the job because of his relationship with Alex, and so he was like, you know, you're gonna be at arm's length, you're gonna have to be. I'll give you this opportunity, but just know you're gonna come in and you're already going to be at a disadvantage because of our relationship. Right. He was talking about where a lot of people come in and they'll make excuses, right? They'll be like, oh, well, I wasn't given the opportunity, or the color. I
didn't have the tools.
or my race or my skin color puts me at a disadvantage. And all that, what he was getting at was all that is probably true. You know, right? I'm a woman in this, you know, and it's a male dominated industry. All of that is valid. But he was getting at, like, what does it matter? Like it did. You can validate it. You can lay over and just take it. But what's that gonna matter? So what he was talking about was like, you're gonna have to work harder than just the average person coming in, or because you're young and because you are related to me, you're gonna have to work twice as hard than anybody here, and nobody's gonna give you an advantage. And so he would. You know, he had to go in and prove himself, and he had the skills and he had the work ethic. So he did it and improved himself and worked himself up to whatever, get in the organization, get a full-time position. But then all his other people were twice his age, right? And they were making twice the income, and they still wouldn't give him time or day. They were like, oh, it's just because your relationship, or, oh, it's just because he's probably giving you leads on the side to help you. And none of that was true, but it was like, are you going to, like, roll over and pout, or are you going to take it? And so he would work harder than everybody else. So he had to put in more preparation, more role playing, more than anybody else, so that he could master that thing. And then there's like, wait, there's no way you're going to make it out there. I think he started live on the phone, and then he went to in person. They all said, there's no way you're going to make it. You know, I've been doing this for 20 years. There's no way you're going to be able to sell. And so he was like, he had to prove himself. And so he had nobody backing him, nobody supporting him. But if you worked hard enough and you outworked everybody, you can prove it. And yes, you're at a disadvantage. And yes, you had valid reasons for that was not right of people to prejudge you, you know.
Right,
but it was like, who cares? Move on and outwork them. And so that was going back to what you were saying. So that was a long story.
I love it, though. No, it's true, though.
But it's like people just don't realize that. Like, you know, when Joni and I started off running houses and all that, we were 19 years old. We had no business buying real estate at 19 years old, right? But we would, and we looked really young. And so like
we had to put in the extra work. I mean, I remember role playing in our office on knocking on doors together, right?
And then we would knock on 100 doors a week for like 10 years. So like you get pretty good at taking objections and no's and rejection over and over. And before that, we used to sell a multi-level marketing. And so like we got really good at taking rejection and no's, but we were maybe too naive, too stupid, but we just kept doing it, kept practicing, right? And but like, I don't think most people aren't willing to go through that much rejection and
putting themselves out there.
Yeah. And so like, it was just years of all of that just being, and you fall, you get back up, you learn, you master your craft, and then it gets better and better, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the last point I want to make on that is on the follow-up, right? I think a lot of times salespeople fail on the follow-up. They think that, I'm going to call them once and that's it. Or, I talked to them once and they didn't sign the deal, so I'm moving on. Guys, like, I'm sorry, but you have to follow up 10 times, several times before you're going to get the deal sometimes, right? And so just know that. I mean, I remember when we knocked on doors, like, this one that looks good. Let's keep following up with them. We built rapport with this person. They're just not ready, right? And we'd go back to the house and build more rapport with them. They're still not ready. So then we'll go back to the house again and build more rapport with them, right? It took sometimes 10 visits to see them so that they can trust us before they were ready.
Correct. And we were just, and persistent, right? And it was just constant, like, there were deals where we would buy, and buying pre-foreclosures teaches you a lot. But I mean, there were times where we knew it was a good home, it might be vacant, so we would research their grandmother, uncle. We didn't know who they were related to these people somehow. So we'd go knock on the door, knock on the relative's door.
We're like, if they're not going to respond to us by opening their door at their current residence, we'll find another way.
Yeah, so we'd go to family members, knock on their door, and they think it's the craziest thing in the world. Think we're crazy, but hey, we'd get the people to respond, or they'd put us in contact with the homeowner, and that we worked deals. And I mean, we were persistent. Like we
drove all the way to
Mexico.
Corpus Christi.
Yeah, on the border. Literally, it was their house was on the border. Like you could see the Rio Grande right there, the river, and with a big wall. It wasn't Trump's wall, but it was a wall, to coming into the U.S. And so, like, literally right there. And so we drove all the way there just to get a deal, right? And Joni, this is a good story.
It is a good story, but
so Joni, so we were like, so we called them. We went to a relative's. They put us in contact, which they had already moved out of the house and moved all the way to Corpus Christi, or on the border. And so then we, it wasn't Corpus. It was like,
Loretto. Wasn't it Loretto?
I don't know.
Yeah, Texas. But it was. Border.
And so we were like, well, then we called and we said, hey, can we come down? And we would like to talk to you about your home and help you with your house. She's like, well, I gave it up on her. And we said, well, if we can help you out and get you out of the situation, and would you work with us and all that? And so she was like, yeah, but you can come down and we could talk about it. So it was a 5-hour drive. So we got on the road the next day, and Joni was all we could afford was McDonald's. So for breakfast, so Joni's eating her yogurt and rips open the bag of
do not ever rip a bag with your teeth ever.
So she ripped the nuts or whatever to put in your yogurt, and just her tooth broke. The front tooth just totally cracked. And so she was freaking out, like, so she was looking like a big cracked tooth in the front and I'm like, hey, you're just gonna be more relatable, right? So
show up with like half a tooth,
and I mean, they felt bad, but it's a good story, and they related to it, they understood, and they appreciated it. We got the house signed, and then drove back, and then you had you were teaching a class that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so it was like a Sunday. So we got the dentist to come in on a Sunday to fix your tooth, but. Anyways,
hey,
but
do whatever it takes. You do whatever it takes.
So, anyways, but that's it. It's just that relentless pursuit, I think, also sets you apart in
absolutely
in becoming a master in sales, is just that relentless pursuit. So again, just to summarize, preparation, persuasion, that pursuit of the deal or the closing, and then meeting the client at their needs and understanding them and being aware and listening and but again, going back to preparation and
outworking everyone.
Outworking
everyone.
Yeah. So, and it's not something like I think people today like to hear, they're looking for this like 4-hour work week and all that, and that's great and all, but
is that realistic?
but if it could be, but if you really, I think that you got to put in your time if you're going to get there. So
100%.
Yeah. So if
not easy, but doable. Correct.
So I think you have to put in the work and outwork everybody. The Rock is a really good example of that, and he talks about it all the time. And if you ever listen to his podcast or listen to his Instagram and all that, he's always talking about being the hardest worker in the room.
Yep.
And so, and that's why he's had a good run too. So it's just outworking everybody, and that's what it takes majority of the time. So, and if you're not willing to do that, then don't expect to have the results that some of the top performers have. But if you know that you can obtain that, if you're willing to outwork everybody, it's 100%. It doesn't matter about who you are, your background, or where you're from, or your upbringing, or color of your skin, or anything like that. If you're willing to put in the work and outwork everybody, you can get there. So, cool.
Love it.
Anything else?
No, absolutely love it. And guys, get out there and make something happen.
See y'all.
See ya.
You've been listening to Inside the Wolf's Den, an entrepreneurial journey with Shawn and Joni Wolfswinkel. Tons of entrepreneurial podcasts are out there. Talking. But Joni and Shawn are living it every single day. Their portfolio now includes many franchises and medium-sized businesses. We talk about the trials and motivators of successfully running a business. Join us again soon for another podcast. But until then, reach out on the website at InsideTheWolfsDen.com, on Facebook at Inside the Wolf's Den, on Instagram at Inside the Wolf Den. We'll see you again soon. This is Inside the Wolf's Den. We'll see you next time.